Hey listeners, this is Peter and welcome back to the History Shorts. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the world. Download Podcast Republic today, available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Today on History Shorts. It's the smallest country in the world, at just 109 acres. And yet, within its walls, decisions have shaped the destiny of billions. Home to the Pope, the Vatican is at once a city, a state, and a symbol, a paradox of spiritual devotion and political complexity that has endured for nearly 2 millennia. This is the story of Vatican City, from a humble hill outside ancient Rome to the beating heart of global Catholicism. Today's history brief will finish us off with the famous Americans you didn't know existed. A quick word from our sponsors.
This podcast is supported by The RealReal. Meet Christine. She loves shopping. And this is the sound of fashion overload. Too many fabulous things, not enough space. So Christine started selling with The RealReal.
I've always loved collecting designer pieces. Gucci bags, Prada heels. But my style keeps evolving. Selling with The RealReal? Game changer. I earn more, and they do everything.
Seriously, just drop off your items or schedule a pickup. We handle the photos, descriptions, pricing, even shipping. You just sit back and watch your items sell fast to our 38 million members.
And I get peace of mind knowing I earn more selling with The RealReal than anywhere else.
Exactly. That's the sound of your closet working for you. The RealReal. Earn more, save time, sell fast. And right now, you can get an extra $100 site credit when you sell for the first time. Go to therealreal.com to get your extra $100. Therealreal.com. That's therealreal.com.
This day in history. On February 5, 1917, Mexico adopted a new constitution following years of revolution. The document introduced sweeping land reforms, labor protections, and limits on foreign ownership, making it one of the most socially progressive constitutions of its time. On February 5, 1953, jazz pianist Duke Ellington performed his final concert at Carnegie Hall. The event capped decades of innovation that helped define jazz as a uniquely American art form. Story of the day. Long before there was the Vatican, there was a hill, Vaticanus Mons, lying just west of the river Tiber, on the outskirts of ancient Rome. In the 1st century AD, this was no sacred site at all. It was just a palace of gardens, tombs, and during Emperor Nero's reign, execution grounds. If you listen to an episode that started this week, and now this one that's coming to you towards its end, you probably know how I was inspired to do this particular topic. But anyway, so there might be a little bit overlap right here. According to Christian tradition, it was here on this mountain around AD 64 that St. Peter, one of Christ's apostles and the first bishop of Rome, was crucified upside down during Nero's brutal persecution of early Christians. His followers are said to have buried him in a nearby necropolis, a Roman cemetery that still lies beneath today's basilica. That grave, simple and secret, would one day become the foundation of the Catholic world. As the Roman Empire declined and Christianity spread, the Bishop of Rome, later called the Pope, grew in authority. By the 4th century, Emperor Constantine the Great legalized Christianity and commissioned a grand basilica over Peter's tomb. Completed around AD 326, Old St. Peter's Basilica became the center of Christian pilgrimage, a visible link between Rome's imperial past and its new Christian future. Over the centuries that followed, the papacy transformed. From spiritual shepherds, popes evolved into political rulers, monarchs in their own right, you might say. By the early Middle Ages, they owned vast territories known as the Papal States, stretching across central Italy. The Pope crowned emperors, raised armies, and negotiated treaties, and taxed lands. In short, he was both priest and prince. But this dual identity would prove both a blessing and a curse. By the time of the Renaissance, the papacy had become one of Europe's most powerful and controversial institutions. Popes like Nicholas V, Sixtus IV, and Julius II transformed Rome from a crumbling medieval city into a showcase of art, architecture, and grandeur. They commissioned Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel ceiling, Raphael's frescoes, and the reconstruction of St. Peter's Basilica itself, which began in 1506 under Julius II and completed over a century later. The result was breathtaking, but it came at a price. The Vatican's patronage of art and its political intrigues, well, required money, and lots of it. And to raise those funds, the church sold indulgences and offices, fueling resentment that would explode in 1517 when a German monk named Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to a church door in Wittenberg. The Protestant Reformation shattered Christendom and plunged Europe into more than a century of religious war. The Vatican, once the uncontested center of Christianity, suddenly found its authority challenged and its moral integrity questioned. Yet even amid chaos, it adopted, hosting the Council of Trent in the mid-1500s, which reaffirmed doctrine, reformed abuses, and ushered in the Counter-Reformation. Rome might have been scarred, but it would survive. For the next 3 centuries, the popes ruled over their Italian territories as independent monarchs. By the 19th century, nationalism was rising, and nowhere more dramatically than in Italy. In the 1860s, revolutionaries under Giuseppe Garibaldi and King Victor Emmanuel II sought to unify the Italian peninsula into a single nation. The Papal States stood in their way. Pope Pius IX, a staunch conservative, refused to surrender his temporal power. But in 1870, Italian troops entered Rome and seized the last of the papal lands. The Pope withdrew into the Vatican, declaring himself a prisoner of the Vatican, to be precise. For nearly 60 years, popes refused to recognize the legitimacy of the Italian state. They celebrated no public masses outside the Vatican walls. Pilgrims came and went, but politically the papacy seemed adrift, a moral authority without a country. That standoff would last until 1929, when an unlikely deal brought peace. Enter Benito Mussolini. Yep, the Italian dictator of World War II. Anyway, Benito was seeking to legitimize his fascist regime. Negotiating on behalf of King Victor Emmanuel III, Mussolini struck a historic agreement with Pope Pius XI. The Lateran Treaty, signed on February 11, 1929, created the independent state of Vatican City, recognizing its sovereignty and compensating the Church for the loss of the Papal States. In return, the Vatican recognized the Kingdom of Italy, ending nearly 6 decades of hostility. Vatican City would be a neutral, independent microstate, governed by the Pope, defended by the Swiss Guard, and supported by the Catholic Church worldwide. At just 109 acres, it became, and remains, the world's smallest country, but its influence would prove anything but small. Just a decade after its founding, the Vatican faced its greatest modern test, World War II. Under Pope Pius XII, the Church declared neutrality, offering humanitarian aid to prisoners, refugees, and victims of bombings. Yet, neutrality was complicated. Critics accused the Vatican of remaining silent in the face of Nazi atrocities, especially the Holocaust. Defenders argued that public condemnation would have endangered Catholics across occupied Europe and hampered secret rescue efforts. To this day, historians debate Pius XII's legacy, whether he was a cautious diplomat or a moral coward. What is undeniable is that the war forced the Vatican to navigate the razor's edge between spiritual leadership and geopolitical survival. And in its aftermath, the Church would emerge as one of the few institutions with moral authority intact, if slightly bruised. By the mid-20th century, the Catholic Church faced a new challenge, the modern world itself. In 1958, the election of Pope John XXIII marked a turning point. Known affectionately as the Good Pope John, he shocked conservatives by convening the Second Vatican Council in 1962, the first time that happened in nearly a century. Over 3 tumultuous years, bishops and theologians debated the Church's role in a changing world. The resulting reforms, known as Vatican II, revolutionized Catholicism. Mass could now be celebrated in local languages instead of Latin. Relations with other Christian denominations and world religions was encouraged. The Church shifted from defensive isolation to engagement with modern society. The Vatican, once seen as the seal of rigid authority, suddenly became a beacon of renewal. But the reforms also sparked divisions that echo to this day. Anyway, in the decades that followed, the papacy became increasingly global. Pope John Paul II, elected in 1978, was a charismatic figure who transcended borders. A Pole who had lived under both Nazis and communists, he used the Vatican as a platform for moral resistance, inspiring the solidarity movement in Poland and hastening the fall of Soviet communism. Under his leadership, the Vatican became not just a religious center, but a global diplomatic force. By the 21st century, the Vatican maintained full diplomatic relations with over 180 countries, influencing global debates on poverty, human rights, and bioethics. But scandals, too, cast shadows. From financial corruption within the Vatican Bank to revelations of clergy abuse that rocked the Church's moral credibility. Popes Benedict XVI and Francis have faced these crises head-on, each in his own way. Benedict through doctrinal clarity and resignation, Francis through reform, humility, and outreach to the marginalized. Even in an increasingly secular world, Vatican City remains a moral and political crossroads, where faith meets power, and where ancient rituals coexist with modern media. The History Brief. The following comes from Felton and Fowler's Famous Americans You Didn't Know Existed, published in 1981. George Newitt. Roosevelt Gets Drunk. Michigan newspaper editor George Newitt wrote in his Iron Ore newspaper in 1912. And not infrequently, and all his inmates know it, he said. That was Teddy Roosevelt that he was defaming, 26th President of the United States and at the time campaigning for re-election. After the contest, which Roosevelt lost by the way, he initiated a lawsuit against Newitt, and the case came to trial on May 26, 1913, in Michigan. By that time, Roosevelt and his attorneys had assembled an imposing group of witnesses, including cabinet officers, generals, and clergy who would swear to the ex-chief executive's uncompromising sobriety. Newitt, one of the most powerful small-town editors in the Midwest, knew that he was licked. And on the 6th day of the trial, he took the witness stand himself and admitted that he had been, and I quote, unable to find in any section of this country any individual witness who is willing to state that he has personally seen Mr. Roosevelt drink to excess, end quote. Teddy beamed triumphantly and asked the judge to award him only nominal damages. Nominal is what he got. The court commanded Newitt to pay TR a settlement of 6 cents, the minimum then allowable under Michigan law. Thank you so much for spending some time with me again today and helping me make this little show such a mighty success. If you are enjoying this show and would like to help with its production, you can always donate a few dollars at buymeacoffee.com or become a Patreon member to enjoy these episodes ad-free. Both links can be found on my website at www.historyshortspodcast.com. Have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you all again tomorrow.